Hi, I'm Effie, and in today's video I'm going to be watching back the 2 anticipated releases videos that I made for the year of 2024. I didn't realise until I was preparing for this video, but both of my anticipated releases lists were specifically for vampire books, so we've got a little bit of a theme going on. So I guess let's get cracking watching back these videos. So the first video is the one that I made last December, and it's titled 20 plus vampire books that I'm excited to read next year. Let's just watch them. Because I know everyone and their mother and their dog and their cousin's iguana does an anticipated releases video. So I don't know what I was on with that comment, but that makes me chuckle. That's not the point of this video. It's literally just to watch back and say which of these books I placed on my anticipated releases list. I will pop a count on screen so we can see hopefully it ticking up with books that I actually have read. I think there is a little bit of duplication across the two videos, but I don't think it's too much. So first up we have Bless Your Heart. So the first book on the list is, this is not really the place to talk about what went down with the ending of the St. Martin's Press boycott, but it's worth noting that there are going to be books that I kind of gloss over in this video because they were being published by St. Martin's Press. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think I actually read any of them anyway, because it's a little bit expensive for me to get my hands on St. Martin's Press books because they generally are imports. Although this first one on the list, which I've not read, I believe it's being published by, or has been published by, Solaris, but I just haven't read it. So we've got Unholy Terrors by Lyndall Clipps. Nope. Another one that I've not read. Let me just watch myself read the blurb and see if it's something that I'm still interested in. Sink your teeth into a blood-stained tale of a girl torn between her vows and her heart, where falling in love may be the deepest sin of all. Evelyn Blackthorne has devoted her life to the Wardens, a fierce sect who wield arcane magic and guard against vampiric monsters known as the Vespertine. When a strangely human Vespertine is killed on their borders and a series of unsettling events follow, Evelyn disobeys orders and uncovers a startling truth in the form of Ravel Severin, a rogue Vespertine who reveals the monsters have secrets of their own. Ravel promises the help she needs, but or a heavy price. Oh my gosh, this synopsis has got so many mistakes. I'm just gonna stop reading there. I'm also getting slightly from Blood and Ash vibes. So I have to agree with myself there in that it does sound a little bit YA, but it also does sound somewhat interesting. So I think it is something that perhaps I would like to, keep on my periphery radar. I do have, and it's not a vampire book, but I do have Clipston's 2025 release. So that'll also be, a decider, because I'll be able to see if Clipston's writing is something that I get along with. When I Arrived at the Castle by Emily Carroll. I know this is a re-release and that cover is so pretty. I have actually read this one. I think Carroll's writing style can be a little bit difficult for me to follow along, but I did actually quite enjoy this. Although looking online at people's thoughts on the ending, it would seem that I took something quite different from the story than a lot of people's interpretation.
The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland.
So I haven't read The God of Endings, but I definitely think it's something that I'm going to really enjoy. It sounds like it's going to be quite a lyrical and gently paced story, and very much a story that's character work as opposed to plot based, which I think is the kind of thing that would work particularly well for this kind of story.
Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole.
Sorry, I was coughing as past me said that title. The Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole. I think that's actually the third book in a series, so I haven't read the first book in the series yet, but it is still something that I am interested in.
My Vampire Plus One by Jenna Levine.
So I have in fact read My Vampire Plus One. It was quite a serviceable contemporary romance with, well, is it contemporary romance? It's paranormal romance. It's a contemporary setting where the existence of vampires is not widely known, and this woman unwittingly engages in a fake dating scenario with a vampire. I had a couple of critiques of it, but overall I did have a good time. Interestingly, watching back over myself reading that blurb, it sounds like the book got changed up quite a lot before publication, because to the best of my knowledge, that's not how the book goes down at all. And it's actually like, I was sitting here watching myself read the blurb and gaslighting myself, because this story, I mean, I'm not going to have included the, past me reading the blurb in this video, but in the blurb it talks about our two characters basically start off the story going to the wedding together, and the vampire makes an absolute ass of himself, but they start growing closer over the summer. But in fact, what ends up happening is that they literally bump into each other, and I think he's still a plus one, but it's for a wedding 3 months in the future, and they end up having to go to a couple of family events in the meantime to, sell the ruse. So very interesting that a synopsis was put out probably before the book was even written, because that's so different from the book we actually got.
A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. This is the third book in a series, but I think they're all standalones.
So I haven't read that one. I did get it on deal on Kindle a little while back, so it is going to be a little bit of a higher up my list than some of the others, just because I own it now.
Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright.
That is another book that I have not read. I'm not doing very well with this video, but I do have it on my shelves behind me. It was the August Illumicrate pick, and it's quite a pretty edition. They didn't do too much to change it up. Basically, I think it's like a black and gold cover. But I am particularly interested because I believe it's poly, and I also believe it has trans rep. I could be wrong though. It could just be that the author is trans, but just very, very excited.
This Ravenous Fate by Hayley Dennings.
I have in fact not read This Ravenous Fate, and even worse, I got an ARC and I just didn't manage to read it. I think unfortunately what happened was, when I would have read it, I was doing a lot of reading to figure out who I wanted to vote for in this year's Hugo Awards. So I didn't manage to get a chance. Like, I'm very proud of the amount that I managed to read for the Hugo Awards, but it did mean that some of my arcs fell to the wayside. There's not a high chance, but there is a chance I might read it before the end of this year, but at the time of filming and probably at the time that this video goes up, I've not read this Ravenous Fate, but I am still incredibly interested in reading it.
Our Little Monster, a Why Choose Vampire Romance by Lachelle Rain.
I have not picked this up. I think, and this is absolutely terrible, I'm really bad for not wanting to pay more than 99p for a Kindle book. I think part of it is that because I have Kindle Unlimited, I feel like I'm already paying for Kindle books. Also, there is a level of, there's only finite amounts of time that you have to read, and I already have quite a lot of books on my Kindle, and I'm just terrible at buying Kindle books, basically. But I am theoretically still interested in it. I don't know that we have any more information in terms of a synopsis than we had at the time that this video went up, presumably because this book has been out for months, but I genuinely don't know.
We're going to skip the next one because it's being published by Wednesday Books.
So I can obviously talk about the dangerous ones now. I don't remember very much about it, but Lauren Blackwood is the author of Within These Wicked Walls, which was a reimagining of Jane Eyre taking place in, I want to say Ethiopia, but I could be miles off there, and it was utterly fantastic. So I'm excited at the potential to read more work from her.
Mortal Pleasures by V. Castro.
This is a book that I do own, but I haven't managed to find time to read yet.
An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson.
I have in fact read An Education in Malice. I was lucky enough to get an ARC, an e-ARC. The only publisher that sends me physical ARCs is Angry Robot. I was lucky enough to get an ARC of An Education in Malice, and I had the absolute best time. I also loved that we got a cameo of some of the characters from A Dowry of Blood, which really just added to the whole experience of reading this book.
Okay, the next three books are books 2, 3 and 4 in the Filthy Rich Vampire series. So we've got Second Right, 3 Queens and 4 Eternity.
So I managed to get copies of all three, again through a Kindle deal, but I haven't found the chance to read them yet. I think part of it is that I would like to go back and reread the first book in the series, which is just called Filthy Rich Vampire, and then I would want to continue the series on from there. But I do have every intention of actually reading these three books. It'll be in the new year now, but I do plan on reading them.
Fallen Thorns by Harvey Oliver Baxter. I am lucky enough to have received an ARC for this book. At the time that this video goes up, hopefully I've managed to read it this side of the new year, but if not, it's going to be one of the first books that I read in January because I'm so excited to get to it. I've read the first few pages and they are exceptional.
So I'm just going to pause myself there and say that I had in fact managed to read Fallen Thorns in 2023. So probably, honestly, by the time this video went up, I had actually finished it already.
Bride by Ali Hazelwood.
So I have also read Bride. Yay! I think I'm doing not terribly at having had read these books. I enjoyed it. I was really surprised because I thought Ali Hazelwood's work wouldn't be my thing, and I still possibly think that about her contemporary books, but this really worked for me. The exception being the knotting scene felt particularly uncomfortable. I have read a number of Omegaverse books, not a super lot, but I have read some, and it is by far the most uncomfortable knotting scene, or I think it's just one scene, that I have read to date.
A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal.
So this is another one that I haven't read yet, and I think the petty in me is strong because I really didn't like the Fairy Loot edition. It was made particularly annoying by the fact that I kept my Fairy Loot YA subscription specifically because I wanted this book. Like, I've still got my Fairy Loot YA, I ended up just continuing to keep it. But considering I was getting the subscription basically so I could get this book, and then for the edition to be an absolute letdown was a real shame. But I still do intend on reading this book. I mean, also, I just don't think I've found the time to prioritize it.
Violets and Vampires, that's what it's called, by CB.
Okay, so this is a weird one in that it sort of exists, but it sort of doesn't. This book has not come out. It is meant to be book 3 in the series that I can't remember what the series is called, but it is meant to be the 3rd book in the series, and it's following, I think, a different pairing than the first 2 books were. But when you go on Amazon, for example, it will say that books 1 and 2 are 1 and 2 respectively of 3 books, but then when you cycle through every edition, not a single one shows up more than books 1 and 2. So I don't know what's happened with this book, but it's not come out, and thus I've not been able to read it. And as I just said in this video, that was the last book on this list. So let's just move straight on to the other list.
So the first one we've got is The Hunter's Gambit by C.O. Peeler.
I have read that. It's slutty bisexual vampires who are also in a triad. I was very lucky to get a physical arc of this book from Angry Robot, and then when I went to Worldcon in August, I was able to meet the author and get my copy signed and dedicated. So all good stuff. I do thoroughly recommend this one. So we're starting off this video strong with a vampire book I've actually read.
Cloak of the Vampire by Sapir A. Engelard.
This is a book that I haven't forgotten about, but I just don't think it's been a priority for me, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. I believe this one is available on Kindle Unlimited, or at least it has been available on Kindle Unlimited at points in time. Yeah, it's fine. I haven't read it, and I don't feel like I'm missing out for that fact.
The next book is Honey Craves, which is the 3rd and final book in the Honeyblood series by I.S. Bell.
So I have read this one. I made it a priority because I absolutely adore the Honeyblood series. I had such a good time with this series that I've actually backed the author's Kickstarter for her MM vampire trilogy that's coming out in 2025, which I will talk more about in my anticipated vampire books video that's coming out at some point this month. But yeah, I love Honeygraves. Like, do I wish there was a little bit more to the ending? Yes, but I think it's a case of like, this is not closing the book on the series. And I think it's also worth remembering that when your protags are teenagers, like, albeit in the final year of high school, but when your protags are teenagers, them having an HEA is relatively unrealistic. Like, they definitely have a happy for now, but it's not an HEA.
Beautiful Villain by Rebecca Kenny.
So I have not read this one, but I am going to say for a very specific purpose, because I have several Gatsby reimaginings across all of my different shelves, and it's my intention to do a video around these different Gatsby reimaginings, of which Beautiful Villain is Gatsby but with vampires. I think there's some other unique twists to it, but the primary thing is it's Gatsby with vampires. So I'm hoping that that video will happen next year. Just know that is something that I intentionally want to do, and that is basically why I haven't picked up Beautiful Villain, because I wanted to read it alongside a whole heap of other Gatsby books.
Mistress of Lies.
Okay, so this one is a duplicate, so we're just going to skip right through it. I think the fact that this appears across both lists, oh, the next one too, but the fact that Mistress of Lies is on both lists does reinforce my interest in it. And then, as you can see, the next book that I was talking about was A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire, which, as we've already established, I have not read yet, but I do own the ebook. So again, we're just going to skip right past this one because it is a duplicate again. And we have another duplicate, this Ravenous Fate, which, as we've already established, I've not read. So let's move on through.
The Ones Who Come Back Hungry by Amalinda Berube.
So this is a book that I am very much interested in, but I don't know. I think in the latter half of 2024, my focus was very much on trying to clear through my backlist of arcs. So looking for new releases wasn't really something that I was doing. But I believe this book is being published, or rather has been published, by Source Books, and generally their books are paperback. I actually don't know if they do any hardbacks, and them being paperback puts their prices more in the realm of like available to me, because I could probably get a copy for this for like £7-8. I think the RRP on a paperback nowadays is £9.99, so getting it for a couple of pounds cheaper is not unusual. But yeah, I am still interested in this book. I guess slipped my mind.
Unholy Terrors by Lyndall Clipston.
This is yet another duplicate, so let's just move on through.
The Vampire of King Street by Asher Grayling.
I completely forgot about this book, and I am so fascinated by it because it's something so very different than a lot of these vampire books. Don't get me wrong, I love a vampire romance. I probably could never get bored of a vampire romance, but this one I think is like a murder mystery. I don't know. Let's watch what I said when I read the blurb.
Oh yeah, this is a really unique take on a vampire story. In this gothic debut novel, perfect for fans of Tread of the Angels and Gail Carringer's Soulless, Miss Radhika Dhingra, a newly minted lawyer in 19th century New York, never expected that her first client would be a vampire accused of murder. Having a resident vampire is just the thing for the upper class New Yorkers. Beside being a status symbol, they make excellent butlers or housekeepers. The only thing they require in return is a drop or two of blood and a casket to shut out the dawn's early light. Tolerated by society only if they follow a strict set of rules, vampires are seen as less than, and as the daughter of immigrants, Rahika knows firsthand how this feels. Accused of murder, her undead client, Mr. Evelyn Moore, knows that the cards are stacked against him. With the help of a journalist friend and a diminutive detective inspector, Mr. Hingra sets out to prove her client's innocence and win his freedom. Failure will mean Mr. Moore's death and the end of her dreams of becoming a successful attorney, and the loss of the vampire Mr. Hingra has begun to call her friend. Offering an alternative paranormal history, delightful characters, and insightful social commentary.
So, yeah, that kind of reinforces that.
A vampire plus one.
Oh, sorry. We've got another duplicate there. But as I was saying, the Vampire of King Street sounds like a unique and unusual take, and something that I'm very on board with. The fact that it also has a BIPOC cast and potentially a BIPOC author, I don't know. I'm not going to Google that right now, but potentially it is coming from own voices. Makes it all the more a priority for me because I am very aware that I need to make sure that if I'm reading this quantity of vampire books, I'm making sure that I am diversifying my lists. And like it's not a hardship to do, especially because diversifying a list gives you such unique takes, whereas, you know, if I just read from straight white authors, cis as well, I likely wouldn't get half the interesting and involved interpretations that I have gotten with some of the vampire books that I've read.
Immortal Dark by Tigres Germer.
So yeah, I have read Immortal Dark and I had a really amazing time with it. It is quite a unique take, and I like how adversarial our two central characters were at the beginning of the story, and it did seem like as the story progressed, their feelings for one another developed quite organically. I also love that it opens with our FMC just being like, yeah, I murdered this person. What are you going to do about it?
Lucy Undying by Kirsten White.
No, I have in fact not read Lucy Undying. I am somewhat nervous of picking up this book. I own it digitally, but I'm somewhat nervous of picking it up because I've had such a negative experience with Kirsten White's books in the past. But additionally, I feel like it's not uncommon for authors to want to put a spin on Dracula, and like Dracula's goofy as anything and, you know, not free from problems in quite a large way. Like, I am not particularly versed in what things are anti-Semitic tropes, but even, you know, having the most like surface level understanding of, you know, anti-Semitic tropes that exist, reading Dracula is horrifyingly, shockingly full. Well, I don't know if it's shocking, like, it's Bram Stoker, but it's like, it's really disgusting. And yeah, but I don't know how I feel about that, what this story's going to be. I also have a really complicated relationship with authors doing sapphic reworkings of Carmilla, because Carmilla is already sapphic, or at least I read it and was immediately like, wow, this is so deeply romantic. So trying to say, oh, this is a sapphic reworking, as if the origin isn't sapphic. And it's kind of similar in when it comes to Dracula. There's always going to be some discussion about whether we are queering the literature ourselves or whether the literature was already queer, but is very far from an uncommon interpretation that the character of Lucy Westenra is not straight. So, I don't know. I do fully intend to read this at some point, but I am a little bit wary about it for the reasons I've just outlined.
Vampires Never Say Die by Galore Duke.
Unfortunately, I have read this one. I did not have the best experience with this book. I have said in multiple videos, because apparently I've ended up talking about this book multiple times, that a large part of my issue with this book is that the body dysmorphia is not handled well. This is a character who becomes a vampire slayer overnight, and with that, she overnight gains all of these muscles throughout her body, but it just read very uncomfortably. I think partially because there was a conflation between fatness and muscle mass, and it just didn't work. Oh, in addition to that, a key part of the plot is our FMC having to choose between being with the character she loves and losing a part of herself that she values. So, just not well done, unfortunately.
A Vile Season by David Ferraro.
I really want to read this. I haven't read it yet, and I'm not sure if the publisher is a US publisher or an international publisher, so I don't know how easy it's going to be for me to get a copy of the book. Like, it's not terribly hard to get your hands on, as long as it's not Barnes and Noble edition, because Barnes and Noble just hates me. But in general, like, it's not the hardest thing to get your hands on US editions, but there is obviously an additional burden of cost, and I'm somewhat reticent to do that for books that I haven't read yet and don't already know that I love. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But yeah, I'd rather not have to spend an inordinate amount of money on a book I haven't tried yet. To be fair, I think this book is going to be really good. I am just very wary of spending larger amounts of money on books.
Night Owls by A.R. Vishnu.
I'll be honest, I completely forgot that this book existed. So obviously I have not read it, but I am incredibly interested in reading it because the folklore that's used for this book is based on traditional Jewish folklore, and that is not a take that I have read a book from yet. I'm not unfamiliar with a variety of different vampire lore, but I haven't read a book that utilizes that, so this is definitely one that I want to, prioritize as much as I can, kind of thing.
Once Upon a Dark October by Jessie Thomas.
This one I started and I DNF'd. I didn't get very far in, so whilst I am very, happy to sort of be like, a DNF is a valid rating, and DNF books that you don't want to read, like, you have no obligation to finish a book just because you started it. But I just wasn't feeling this book. I don't know if it's that the chapters are a little bit on the longer side. I don't know if the pacing fell off. I don't know if I just was feeling a little bit confused by it all. But it just didn't work for me when I first picked it up. So I decided to DNF it. I potentially will pick it up at some point in the future, but I'm going to put this in the red category because I had the intention of reading it, but it didn't work for me. And I hope you agree that's a fine take, because at the end of the day, like, if I'd wanted to, I could have read it.
So we've got This Blood That Breaks Us and This Blood That Bonds Us.
Okay, so I haven't read these because these are book 3 and 4 in the series, and I haven't read book 1 yet. I want to, I just haven't. But it's worth noting that this series in its entirety is on Kindle Unlimited at the moment, and it will be until March of 2025. So I'm going to make it a priority to at least read the first book and get a feel for it. But I have not read either of these 2 books.
A Cruel Thirst by Angela Montoya.
Unfortunately, this was a DNF for me. And unlike Once Upon a Dark October, it's a very firm DNF. It's a DNF going, yeah, I do not want to read this book. I do not want to continue. It just didn't work for me, unfortunately. I think part of it is that it reads YA, and it may intentionally be YA, but that was not the impression I got from the blurb, so my expectations going in were already incorrect. And then add into that it was one of these where it was over blurbed, and at the point I got to in this book, I want to say I got to around 30%. I got a decent chunk of the way through. Some of the things that had been set out in the blurb hadn't happened yet, and also at that point there was no real meaningful relationship between these 2 characters. And if you're trying to sell me a romance, there needs to be something. Like, these characters have interacted twice at the point that I stopped reading, and like, this is them like literally having first met. So it just wasn't great for me. There is a positive, I will say, for this book, in that it takes a slightly less conventional approach to vampirism, in that the vampires not only drink blood, but they take the soul and the life from their victims, which I liked that spin. I just wish that this story was captivating for me.
Keep It in the Dark by Justin Arnold.
Okay, this book I have read, and this book I loved. I've read a lot of vampire books this year, but I would say this is easily one of the best that I've read. This is a vampire hunter story, and they are both in this like elite private high school, the vampire is a vampire prince, and he's been sent to the high school to prove that he can fit in with human society before he goes on a grand European tour as part of his like diplomatic duties as a vampire prince. And his roommate is the headmaster's son, and he's spoiled. He was expecting to not have to bunk with anyone, so now he's like a bit annoyed that he's sharing a room with someone. And there's a little bit of like learning about yourself, like coming to terms with your sexuality. And it's like, it's YA, and it's appropriately YA, but it's like, it's quite sizzling and yearning in that the start of the second chapter immediately is like, damn, this boy's hot. Why has he got to be hot? And I just had an amazing time with it. Also, vampirism as an allegory for queerness is not a unique take, but it is executed with perfection in this book.
And the final book that we've got, it doesn't have a blurb yet, and it doesn't have a release date. It's currently listed on Amazon as being next year. Yeah, it's currently listed on Amazon as coming out next January. But I know from the author's Instagram, oh wait, I think she did publish a blurb on Instagram. She is aiming for autumn. Because she hasn't like written it, finished it yet, we don't know when it's actually going to come out. But she is aiming for autumn this year, which is why I've put it in this video. So the book is Troubled by Elena R. Galea.
Okay, so I genuinely don't know if this book is out yet, so let me check. I think it might be, but I don't know. Because the thing is, I don't feel like I've seen a lot of marketing for it, which makes me think it's not out yet. It's available. It came out on the 4th of November. Well, that answers that. And obviously, because I didn't know it was out, I, haven't read it because I didn't know it existed. Well, like, I knew it existed, but I didn't know it was out into the world. So yeah, have not read that. And I think that is the last book of this list, but I will just quickly finish watching. Okay, that is it. We have finally reached the end of my anticipated releases videos. This was a longer video than I expected. I don't know what I thought it was gonna end up being, but I didn't look at run times when I made a note of my anticipated releases videos. So thank you for sticking with me throughout this video, and I am very excited to dive in to doing anticipated releases for 2025. So if it's something that you do, feel free to subscribe to this channel to see when they go up. But until next time, thank you, love you, bye.